All right, Proverbs chapter 9, verses 7 through 12. I want to start and just read through these verses and then talk about what's going on here. So Proverbs 9, verse 7 says, "He who corrects a scoffer gets shame for himself, and he who rebukes a wicked man only harms himself. Do not correct a scoffer lest he hate you. Rebuke a wise man, and he will love you. Give instruction to a wise man, and he will be still wiser. Teach a just man, and he will increase in learning. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and the knowledge of the Holy One is understanding. For by me your days will be multiplied, and the years of life will be added to you. If you are wise for yourself, and if you scoff, you will bear it alone." So we have in Proverbs 9, this is the conclusion of the opening monologue. This whole first 9 set chapters of Proverbs is one big unit, one big speech, calling the reader, the son in this case, but calling the reader to learn wisdom, to flee folly, and to pursue wisdom. As we saw last week, chapter 9 starts, the first 6 verses present to us a picture of Lady Wisdom. The last 6 verses present to us a picture of Madam Folly. And it presents to us 2 choices. Here, right in the middle of those 2 sections, verses 7 through 12, it continues in talking about wisdom and Lady Wisdom. So it actually ties back to verse 4 and the plea of Lady Wisdom that starts with, "Whoever is simple, let him turn and hear." But verses 7 through 12, they shift a little bit in the way that they are worded and really in the nature of the exhortation. So verses 4, 5, and 6 is a plea to the simple one to find wisdom. But starting in verse 7 is now the exhortation to give instruction to a wise man. So there's a shift in the subject. And then verse 10, 11, and 12 moves back towards the plea to the simple. But what that does, that change, and beginning in verse 7, really sets off these 6 verses as unique in the chapter. And they really are unique in the chapter, and they are unique in the book of Proverbs. They are set out for our attention. And then you get to verse 10. It's not the exact middle of the chapter, but it is, I would say, close enough. It is really the central, or it's the fourth of the let me say that again. It's the third of 4 exhortations here. We have the wisdom herself, the presentation of wisdom, then 7 through 9, again, giving instructions. 10 through 12 is the value of wisdom, and I would say the beginning of wisdom. And then 13 through 18 is the presentation or description of folly. And so we have right in verse 10 this crucial statement. This is the fundamental statement of Proverbs, that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And this verse itself is a chiasm. Does anybody remember what a chiasm is? Exactly. So it's kind of it's stated one way and then it's back to front on the second line or the funnel. So you start with an idea, first and last idea is the same, second, third idea is the same, middle idea is the same. That's the basic idea of a chiasm. Verse 10, even though in the English it is a synonymous parallelism, it's saying the same thing twice. In the Hebrew, it is actually more chiastic. It's not, I wouldn't say it's a perfect chiasm, but it certainly is ordered that way. So it actually, I'll try to read it, try to give you an idea of what it would be, the way it's ordered, is beginning of wisdom is the fear of God. And then knowledge of the Holy One is understanding. So you have understanding and wisdom on the outside ends, or bracketing everything that is in the middle. And it's a part of the structure that shows us this right here is the center of chapter 9. Even though line count-wise it's not exactly the center, but thematically the ideas of it, this is the center of chapter 9. Chapter 9 is the climax of the opening monologue. This is the center, the focal point. This is the very tip of the peak of Proverbs. It's the foundation, Proverbs 1:7, and it's also the very top, the very tip of it is this fear of the Lord. And so that what we see here now presented to us is the choice. Starting in verse 7, where we see two different responses. So the first response is that of a scoffer. So the language of the verse is a warning to those who would correct a scoffer. And verse 8, same thing, do not correct a scoffer. But in the course of this warning, we are shown this is how a scoffer responds. He dishonors the disciplinarian. So verse 7, he who corrects a scoffer gets shame for himself. And that word corrects, it's the same word that's used, translated elsewhere in Proverbs as disciplines. It's not just instructive. It is that corrective instruction. Certainly at times in Proverbs, it has a painful aspect of it, a punishment aspect of it. And so the one who corrects a scoffer gets what? Gets shame. There is he is not elevated in the eyes of the community, certainly not in the eyes of the scoffer, but he is scorned. And then he also harms the reprover. So the one who rebukes a wicked man hurts himself. So when you're talking about this scoffer, the attempt to rebuke him is self-destructive. It's not going to do you any good or him, because the scoffer hates the reprover. The scoffer does not appreciate when somebody corrects him. One of the visitors that was here last week, he was telling me that he was looking for a pastorate or looking for a pastoral position, and he sent out his resumes, and a pastor that received one of the resumes called him up and corrected him on something that I won't go into the details, but something related to his ministry. And this guy, out of the blue, corrects him on this. And of course, you can probably imagine the initial response is, who is this guy? But I was impressed because the visitor last week, he said that was his initial response, but then he listened and profited by it. So actually that man became a mentor for him. A scoffer is not going to respond like that. You come up to a scoffer, even if you have an authority and a relationship to justify, this is why I'm telling you this. The scoffer is going to hate you for your reproof. He will not receive it. And this scoffer is the ultimate fool. He is at the bottom of folly. He is as low as it gets. Proverbs describes him in a variety of ways. He is stubborn. He is vicious. He is hardened in his folly. He hates anyone who would correct him. He is so arrogant. He can never be wrong. No one can ever teach him or tell him anything. And as a result of his arrogance and just complete hardness to wickedness, any attempt to rebuke him is going to get nothing but trouble for the rebuker. And so this warning here is showing us this man, this scoffer, When wisdom comes and says, here, come to my table, come eat of the feast I have prepared, he is going to say, I don't want that. No. Because wisdom, in chapter 9, she's presented as a hostess, inviting us to the banquet. But don't forget, back in chapter 1, she's a bit of a prophetess, warning and rebuking. She is saying, you will suffer judgment, and I will laugh at your judgment. And so she comes, even though the feast is a rich feast, there also is correction in the feasting of wisdom. There is instruction and change, and the scoffer is going to say, no, I don't want that. No, not at all. And he will hate it. On the other hand, verse 8, right in the middle, it says, rebuke a wise man, and he will love you. The response of the wise is love for the reprover. It's what I was just describing. This visitor, he learned to love this man because, in part, he rebuked him. He gave him good instruction. And he appreciated it and learned from him. And the mark of wisdom is he will love the one who seeks to give him correction. I mean, how many of you love it when you're rebuked? Yeah, me too. But what it says is not that he will love the rebuke, but he will love the rebuker. He loves the reprover. He heeds wisdom. Give instruction to a wise man, and he will be still wiser. The wise man is growing in his wisdom. He's learning in that. He is teachable. He heeds wisdom. And then he, as it says again, he teach a just man, he will increase in learning. He learns from teaching. Now, if you remember, part of what we've talked about in going through this contrast between the fool and the wise is the fool never learns from others. He never learns from others' experiences. If he learns, it's always the hard way. The wise can be taught, and he learns the lessons. He avoids the mistakes. He makes the correct choices. And so the wise man is one who loves wisdom even when she rebukes him. He heeds it, listens to it, and learns from it. So these are the choices. Wisdom is telling us, come to me, learn wisdom, get understanding, and with that you will have life. And now here are two ways you could go. You can be a scoffer and hate it, or you can be wise and love it. Then we get to the conclusion of the whole matter. This is where everything starts and where everything ends. Wisdom begins in the fear of God. Turn back to Proverbs 1:7. Proverbs 1:7 says very simply, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. And remember, wisdom and knowledge in Proverbs are nearly synonymous. Proverbs 2, verse 5, it starts off back in verse 2, incline your ear to wisdom, apply your heart to understanding, cry out for discernment, lift up your voice for understanding, seek wisdom as silver, then you will understand the fear of the Lord and find the knowledge of God. So that wisdom is its fountain, is the fear of God. Its fruit, Proverbs 2 verse 5, its fruit of seeking wisdom, the fruit of wisdom is the fear of God. And then we also see, as I just read in Proverbs 2:5 and here now in Proverbs 9:10, again, the knowledge of the Holy One is understanding. So say it a different way, understanding is the knowledge of God. Here, as I've said, wisdom and understanding are identical in this section of Proverbs. There's some nuanced differences, particularly later. But I think we have to say in Proverbs 1 through 9 that wisdom and understanding for all practical purposes are the same thing. And so that this understanding, this skill to navigate life is the knowledge of God. This wisdom to rightly apply knowledge begins in the fear of God. So that all of that we're talking about still is this very practical wisdom, this way of living rightly. And it starts with a right relationship with God, this proper fear of God, and this deep knowledge of God. And I think we know, but just to spell it out for us, this knowledge of God has to be understood. We know this is much more than just possession of a set of facts about God. So tell me what it means that God is omniscient. He knows all things. Is that the knowledge of God, the ability to define omniscience? No. It is part of that process of knowing God, is knowing the character and the nature of God, but it's not the knowledge of God. The knowledge of God is a personal relationship that is personal in its knowledge, so that I know that God is a good God because I have seen His goodness at work in my life. That's part of this great knowledge. There's certainly some things about God that we can never know personally. I cannot know the infinity of God. I can't understand the infinite. I know from the truth of Scriptures that He is infinite, but I barely grasp it. But there are much about God that we should and can know personally. I know God is a God of love, a God of grace, a God of mercy. I know God is the God of all peace. God is the God of comfort. God is a faithful God who keeps all of His promises. I can know these things personally and experientially. And this knowledge is not just experience, but it's also a deep affection. So that there is a beauty and glory of God that I love. That I look at God and I speak of His goodness. It's not something I say like I'm eating Brussels sprouts. I know it's good for me. I know it's right. I guess I'll do it. But it is a truth that He deeply loves. That this God is a God of grace and goodness. This is a deep interest in God that desires to know more of Him, to know what God likes and dislikes. That's an important part of knowing God. And from that then is an increase in our intimacy with God, so that this personal knowledge is growing and growing, so that there is a deep fellowship with God. It's an ongoing, intimate relationship with God. Obviously, there's no physicality to it. We do not have a physical relationship with God in any way. He's not here sitting beside us. We can't put our arms around Him. He doesn't put His arms around us. But there can still be a deep, intimate relationship as we know Him, as we study Him, as we walk with Him. As we learn to love Him more, we draw ever closer to Him, so that even though He's not physically present with us, we know the reality of His presence, and it sustains us. We know the peace that is beyond understanding. I mean, how do we know an unknowable peace? It's present as we know God. Yeah, we say we feel it, but that is coming from that relationship with God. And so we're talking about this knowledge of God involves one's entire being. By hearing Him speak in His Word, by participating in public and private worship of Him, by experiencing the enjoyment of a sensible presence, what Jim was saying there, we feel, we know, and by submitting one's life to His commands. All of this is wrapped up in the knowledge of God. This knowledge of God is not merely intellectual, and it's not merely emotional. I know there are people at times that say, oh yeah, I feel like I'm really close to God. I had this great feeling that God, I love God and God loves me, but they're living in absolute disobedience to Him. They don't know Him. They have some sort of feeling, but that feeling is not from God. It's not a feeling of a relationship with God because they're not submitting to His commands. And this knowledge of God does not come through mere feeling. It does not come only through prayer. It comes by hearing Him speak in His Word. So this knowledge of God and this experience of God is word-based. And then from those truths of the Word, we respond with certain emotions. But the emotions are not the foundation. And so this knowledge of God is something, as he starts off in that quote saying, involves one's entire being. Our minds, our bodies, our emotions, our wills. All of it. Bruce Waltke says the wise begin with their submission to the highest authority, the Lord. That's where wisdom begins. It's just by utter submission to God. And if you would not be a scoffer who rejects wisdom, if you would not be a scoffer who hates correction, you must fear God. You must know Him. Because apart from God, there is no genuine wisdom. It's just not there. And I want to remind us of the importance of that point, because we have a host of people and that are some of them are famous, some of them just have YouTube channels, or I don't even know the other things anymore, but they have something online where they're offering wisdom. They're telling you how to live, what you should want, what choices you ought to make. They're telling you how to live your life. But if they do not know God, they do not have wisdom. Now, they may sometimes get a lucky guess and fall upon a biblical principle, but they do not have wisdom. Because wisdom begins with submission to God. I don't think she's on TV anymore, but Oprah Winfrey was never a source of wisdom. And she was for millions, but she had no wisdom because she did not know God. And whatever it may be, we go to Fox News, and if the anchor or the host does not know God, they do not have wisdom. They may be good political analysts in the sense of able to determine what is going to give somebody more popularity or not. They are not able to tell you what is the godly way to live. And you see the difference? They might tell you what will be beneficial for the economic security of our nation. They will not be able to tell you what is pleasing to God. And wisdom at its foundation is that which fears God. If there is none of that, there is not wisdom. So we go to the consequences of choosing wisdom. We've already seen this in the first part of this chapter, but I want to reiterate it, because this Proverbs has told us over and over and over again, you can choose your path. You cannot choose your consequences. You make the choice of which way you will go, but the destination is set. The end of that path is already determined, and you can't alter it. The only way to change destinations is to change paths. The consequences are long life, full life. And that's really simple. That's just the blessings of wisdom are that we have as I've said very early on, a life worth living over. You think about that. In our lives, how many things would you go back and correct? You would do it differently. All of us have those things. But when we live in wisdom, we're able to live a life that we come to the end and we can say, yeah, I blew it back in my 20s or 30s or 50s or whatever it may be. But those years I spent in wisdom, I'd do it again. I'd love to do it again. That's part of what's being talked about here. And in verse 12, if you're wise for yourself. But if you scoff, you will bear it alone. The consequences of your choices are your own. So we have a wise man who follows Lady Wisdom. We have a scoffer who goes into Madam Folly. These two options, these two choices, and these two people correspond to the invitations that are given. And what we find here is that each of them will bear their own consequences. And certainly, what we do affects others. We live wickedly, it has a negative effect on others. We live righteously, it has a good effect on others. But they're not going to pay the consequences of my sin or your sin. They're not going to reap the rewards of your righteousness. You bear those yourself, so that the fool will suffer the consequences. So the one who turns aside to Madam Folly, what is the ultimate consequence? Yeah, death and destruction. It's his. He will be destroyed because of his choices. The one who heeds wisdom's invitation, what will be his consequence? Yeah, a long and full life. And he will bear that. He will enjoy that. And so we have to choose rightly. And that's what he's driving at. This whole 9 chapters is there's a choice before you. Make the right choice. Let me quickly, I'm just going to survey these things, but I want to walk through, remind us of what wisdom is. Wisdom is our guide into making right moral choices. We follow wisdom. She will lead us rightly. Wisdom is the giver of lifelong and eternal satisfaction. As I've already said, in wisdom is a full life, a good life that is pleasant. Now, I should say and remind us, and it doesn't mean there's no problems, there's no challenges, there's no difficulties, but that even in the midst of those, there is still a fullness and a joy that wisdom gives. Wisdom is a protector against evil choices and their destructive consequences. We see this particularly in chapter 6. Wisdom protects us from death. The wages of sin is death. The end of folly is death. If we are to avoid death, we must walk the way of wisdom. Wisdom protects us from dishonor. There is great shame in sin. Do you remember, it was a month or so ago now, there was some concert that is a big to-do because they had this camera in the concert that they panned the crowd. I think they called it the kiss cam or something like that. And they turned it onto this couple that were there together in the concert. And it made huge news because they immediately started trying to hide from the camera so that people wouldn't know who it was. And so, of course, it came out that one was, I think, a CEO or some bigwig in a company, and the other was also a bigwig in the same company, but they weren't married to each other. They were having an affair, and they got caught on this camera. They were shamed. Right there, they're embarrassed. I think both of them lost their jobs, and the company itself had to come out with these statements basically saying that this is not their culture, they don't support this kind of thing. And I remember this because this happened like the week after I went through Proverbs 6. I thought, man, I wish it had happened a few days ago. It would have been a great illustration of this. So I'm going to use it now. I do use it now. That's what we're talking about. Even in our culture that loves to just flaunt its sin, there is still dishonor in the life of folly. There's still shame there. We know this, and there's very few parents in the world that say, if you don't go to school and you stand around on the street corners, you too can be a drug dealer one day. Nobody does that. I shouldn't say nobody. Unfortunately, there's probably some that do, but very few. We look at that and say, you don't want to live that way. You don't want to be like that. And so is dishonor, and wisdom protects us from it. There's misery. The way of the transgressor is hard. Sin promises happiness, but it gives misery and woe. It saves from embarrassment. Related to the dishonor, which is simply the shame of the sin of being caught. Wisdom protects from punishment. If we don't commit the crime, we don't have to do the time. We don't pay the punishment if we're not sinning. It protects us from the emptiness of hedonism, materialism, and sensualism. Hedonism is just live for whatever pleasure. Materialism is, of course, living for the material things, the goods of this world. Sensualism is living particularly for the lust of the flesh. Really, that's the ism of our day, is the immoral lust of the flesh. And those things are empty. They bring nothing good. They do not bring a full life. Often they cut the life short. They leave a person just a shell. And wisdom protects from that. Wisdom is the source of true honor, wealth, and power. Wisdom is the beginning of a right relationship with God. Wisdom is the explainer of life. She says, counsel is mine, and sound wisdom, I am understanding. How many people are struggling to make sense of life? Wisdom makes sense of life. She delivers from entanglement with the wicked. She is a sentinel against the first step towards sin. Wisdom guards us from turning down that path, from even setting one foot on it. Wisdom, if you will, stands at the ends of that path and says, do not go here. Wisdom is the avenue to honor from God. God says in verse 34, actually, of chapter 8, blessed is the man who listens to me, to listen to wisdom. The blessing from God comes from heeding wisdom. Wisdom is the source of genuine happiness. Wisdom is a treasure greater than wealth. Wisdom is this treasure that can never be lost. Wisdom is the origin of assurance of safety. How do we know if we're going to walk securely in this world? Where does that come from? Wisdom. Wisdom and that security that we can have is founded in a wise life and heeding wisdom. Wisdom gives confidence on the road to life. As we're walking, we have the choices in front of us. Where's the confidence that we're making the right choices come from? It comes from wisdom. It is the source of right and helpful words. When we like to speak right things, we like to speak those things that are of benefit, that direct properly. We do it by paying attention to wisdom and leaning our ear to understanding. Wisdom gives us the right words. Wisdom is a protector from foolish decisions. Wisdom is a shelter from God's wrath. So again, if we don't make the foolish decisions, we don't suffer the chastening of God. She is the giver of practical, emotional, and spiritual intelligence. How do we relate well to this world? Wisdom gives us what we need to do that. Wisdom is the provider of blessing. We have, in contrast to wisdom, folly. Folly is very simply the way of misery, the way of shame, the way of judgment, and the way of death. Folly is the way of misery, shame, judgment, death. So you tell me, which one do you think you should choose? And we have this spelled out for us. And I didn't go through the similar list with folly. I could have gone through a similar list as I did with folly as I did with wisdom and show all the negative consequences, all of the shame, all of the wrath, all of the sorrow and suffering. And Solomon presents these two things and says, choose wisely. As we're thinking about life, as we're helping others make right choices, we should be able and we should be walking through and saying, look, your choices are a choice between wisdom and folly, between right and wrong. And right now, the wrong choice may seem easier, but the consequences are not worth it. The wrong choice will be harder. So choose wisdom, even though the path seems more difficult right now because the end is good. We should be able and we should be encouraging others to think wisely about their decisions, to point them to the truth of the Word of God so that they can see these choices matter. These choices set habits and patterns in our life. They set a trajectory for our life. And that is the course we are going to follow. And if we stay on the wrong course, we will suffer. And so therefore, what we need to do is take responsibility for your choices. I said that this morning, talking about the fact that everything comes out of our heart. Proverbs 4:23. Everything, all the aspects and issues of our life come out of our heart. And so we need to take responsibility, because as long as we push off responsibility onto something else, as long as we blame something else, we're never going to choose rightly. And we acknowledge, there are these challenges, there's these obstacles, there's this opposition, or there's this difficulty that I'm facing. There are things in my life that make this right decision more difficult. But those things in our life never compel us to make the wrong choice. We have to recognize that ultimately the choice is mine. And I'm going to take responsibility for it, even if there's an ingrained habit of many years of bad choices. I'm going to make the right choice and start making the right choice to develop a habit of the right choices. And with that is be receptive of instruction, correction, and rebuke. This is, I think for many of us, this really is the hardest thing. Is to have somebody else come along and say, you blew it. You were wrong there, and you need to change your course. You need to do something else. But to be receptive of that, to listen to it, is the way of wisdom. Fear God. And with that, know God. They go hand in hand. We're not going to fear God if we do not know Him. We're going to walk around with whatever mental picture we have of God, the benevolent grandfather in the sky, or whatever it may be. Know Him. And that should drive us to the proper fear of God, that fear of worship, that fear of obedience, that fear of love. That we want to please God with all that we have. So we fear God, we know Him, and then feast. Feast at wisdom's table. The table that wisdom sets for us is Proverbs 10-31. That's what this book does. From here on out, it displays to us the delicacies of wisdom's feast. The beast that she has slaughtered, the wine that she has mixed, is laid out for us in this grand buffet where we have hundreds of delightful delicacies to teach us. And so feast. Go dig in, memorize them, think deeply about them, and just keep going back over and over and over again. And part of what we're going to be doing is we're going to pick up the next half, really, of this study, is we're going to work through how do we study these Proverbs? How do we really get as much mead out of these as we possibly can? How do we drain the cup dry? That's what I want to help us get to so that we can feast as fully as possible there. And I close with the exhortation. Proverbs chapter 2, verse 7. Wisdom is the principal thing. Therefore, get wisdom. And in all you're getting, get understanding. All the things that we get in this life, all the things our world drives us to try to get, the most important, the chief principal thing that we should get is what? Wisdom. In all of the stuff that we get, shoes, cars, boats, snowmobiles, four-wheelers, houses, land, all the stuff that we get, what should we get? In all of your getting, get understanding so that your life is lived, pursuing, trying to gather as much of this wisdom as you possibly can.